This is David from the Earth Medicine Institute, and I am here with Jodi Polacheck Baygood, and we've been talking about doing a series of interviews with each other. Right now, the Academy is in a bit of a hiatus, so we decided it was a good time to pursue this. So last time I interviewed Jodi, and I think I have two more interviews to do with her, but she specifically asked if she could interview me this time. So here we are.
Here we are. So here I
Hi.
am with David Bruce Leonard,
Yes.
who is brilliant and has written one of the greatest books that I have ever read,
Oh,
How to Worship the Goddess and Keep Your Balls. It's got great humor in here, but the truth is, it has such profound wisdom of the divine masculine and feminine, as well as how to be in relationship with first yourself and then another. And I find that there's so many amazing things. So we're just going to start from the beginning. Is that okay?
sure. Yeah. And we've been working on this obviously for many years together and trying to sort these things out.
Yeah, we've had our own personal experience of communication and working with each other as partners, and then we've also taught together, which is also a totally different dynamic,
Right. That's
and how
true.
to respect each other and each other's autonomy and how we teach, just very different styles.
Yep.
Very different styles.
Yeah.
So, what had you write this book, first of all?
That's a good question. I was I've always been interested in sacred sexuality my whole adult life, and I had just finished Medicine at Your Feet, which is a plant medicine book that I wrote, and it took me 10 years to write. I began it in 1998, and I thought it would be done in a year. And it wasn't until 2008 that I finished it. So it was 10 years of pretty consistent working on it. That was a long time. There's a lot of energy went into that book. And I thought, I want to write another book specifically on sacred sexuality, but I don't want to spend another 10 years to write it. So I decided I was going to write the book and only take a year. So I started out writing about my perceptions of sexuality, and then I realized I couldn't talk about sexuality from a male point of view without talking about male psychology. My my ideas or my hallucinations about what male psychology is and how it functions in general. So yeah. So I just started writing, and I would write paragraphs and then write another paragraph, and then I'd jump around to something else. And very slowly over the course of a year, the book took shape. And yeah, and this woman named Misty Stone did the illustrations. And yeah, and it came together within a year. So it took a year to get that book from conception to into print.
Okay. Well, I also noticed that on the title here, it says A Man's Guide to Sacred Sex. But when I read this book many years ago, when I read this, I felt like it was also a guide for how I need to be in relationship with men. And it was really insightful to know what men are desiring of women.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I would never to presume to understand how women are wired or function. So I was writing it from my perspective, which I assume was sort of rooted in the masculine, but rooted in the young. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the obviously a lot of the ideas fit both genders. You know.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, one of my favorite things that we talk about in our class around the um, watching each other's back.
Hmm.
What was in our personal sanctuary and then our relationship sanctuary class
Hmm.
is in the very beginning of this book, you write about how we're all prone to self delusion and avoidance of accountability, and how we need to go through the process of self confrontation, and that's one of a path of a warrior. Can you talk about some of the things that you had to overcome to be the type of man you are today?
Well, yeah, I don't think it's particularly unique to me. I think that anybody who's, I mean, like as we talk about in our classes, the two of the main obstacles that I see in becoming a healthy human being are the inability to self confront and then inability to self soothe, and self confronting is, yeah, I mean, it's just that we live in these large manufactured hallucinations about the way the world is. And if I don't come to terms with my hallucinations, I'm at a serious disadvantage in navigating the world and myself because I'm perpetually on the defensive. I'm perpetually trying to prop up the way I'd like to be rather than the way I am.
And how do you think that plays out in relationship?
Well, I don't. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, when we or most people I know, including myself and probably you, when we start out with this idealized relationship where everything is going to be hunky dory. I mean, romantic love is the most difficult yoga I have ever experienced, the most challenging. Um,
What's personally the most challenging for you in relationships?
navigating my emotions,
Mhm.
navigating my emotions and my impulses, and my scripting, and how that I have certain patterns, as you well know, right? And those patterns, the most challenging thing is seeing reality and grokking, comprehending reality. So if I'm continually deluding myself as to the nature of what's going on, I can't really function very well. And it creates a lot of unnecessary pain. The pain of facing reality is nothing compared to the pain of my hallucinations about reality.
Well, I like that you say that because in it says, how do you pick your goddess?
Hmm.
In that section of the book, you talk about how do you recognize your partner? And you talk about, I think here we have, you know, that our hormones will tell us one thing about the partner, like,
Right,
if we're really good at sex or we're really attracted, but that we should also stay really open and aware to really listen to who this person is in front of you. So
right.
how can you talk about, like, you know, to those who are looking for a relationship or are in a new relationship, how do you stay open to that when the hormones are so great that we've all
Probably through
been.
messing it up a number of times, right? I mean, a really good thing to do at the end of a relationship is to say, what could I have done differently in that relationship? What was my part in the destructive aspects of that relationship? And then, I have this belief that people will always tell you how they're going to treat you in the future, but you have to listen. They will always tell you. They won't tell you directly how they're going to treat you, but they'll tell you what they did to their landlord or their ex-boyfriend, or how they treat the waitress, or how they treat the cab driver. And if you really listen and why, or they'll either tell you or show you how they're going to treat you in the future. So yeah, so for me, when I'm starting a relationship, my antenna are up 100%, and I'm listening and I'm making notes. Okay, this could be a red flag. This could be a red flag, but I don't, it's not a deal breaker, but I just need to, I make a mental note, okay, to watch out for that. And then if it comes up again and again and again, I realize it's a pattern. Now, that may be a perfectly fine pattern in another relationship, but for me, it doesn't work because of my patterns and my shadows. So it's not necessarily a value judgment, although it can be, or a moral judgment. It's about what is going to work for me.
Right.
Like
Well,
you know really well. Like I have shadows, I have jealousies and stuff, and I have to navigate them in a certain way. And to a certain extent, I can work with that and be really flexible. And in other ways, there's very little room for me to navigate within that in some way. So if I set it up properly and I know myself, I can make requests and set boundaries around things. But ultimately, if it overwhelms me, it's not going to work for either one of us. So, and I think we're all like that. We all have deal breakers in relationships, some of which are somewhat negotiable, but some of which are just how we come into the world. And no matter what we tell ourselves or how much we do our work, that thing is not going to work for us.
one of the things I've always loved about you is that you've always said that jealousy is not a defect of character.
Right. Yeah,
And
jealousy is not a character flaw. How you
not a
handle
character.
jealousy can be a serious character flaw.
Say that again.
I really don't believe that jealousy is a character flaw. I think that how we handle jealousy can be a character flaw, but not the jealousy itself.
Exactly. And then you've also said that about fighting. I remember when we were first starting to date, and you said that you absolutely, in order to be in a relationship, you had to fight fair. Tell me
You
a
need to
little
be
bit
with
about
somebody who can fight fair, yeah.
say a little bit more about that.
Well, it's fighting without blaming, because when we're in a relationship, we're on the same team. If we're not on the same team, we should leave the relationship. So when I'm in relationship with somebody and I am feeling wounded and kicked in the stomach, my impulse, now that wound could have happened intentionally. Somebody may have been trying to hurt me, or it might have just a piece of my shadow that flared up, and that was the wounding. But either way, my desire to lash back is is basically shitting in our nest because those wounds don't heal; they just scar over. You know, in relationship, we know each other really well. And you and I both know things about each other that we could say that would destroy each other. But we're on the same team.
Mhm.
And my wish is not to destroy you. My wish is to have you live the best life you possibly can with me or without me. That's my wish.
And when we
So, yeah. So that impulse to hurt needs to be navigated. And it's a short-term gain because it feels good when it's happening, when I finally get that shot in, but it's a long term, it's a very poor long-term strategy for love.
and so how is this related to like worshiping the goddess? You know,
Worshipping the goddess is just a particular character flaw of mine. So it's the way I'm wired. So, yeah, well, it means that, I mean, like many of us, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I wanted to be a good man. And a good man was somebody that really loved his partner and did whatever they wanted to make them happy. So that would be the worship the goddess part. But somewhere along the line, there was many people I saw that in order to be good men, they wouldn't set boundaries in their relationships. They wouldn't put a sword in the ground for themselves, and that's keeping your balls. And really, the truth is that we can't have a healthy relationship unless we put a sword in the ground for ourselves and also create a relationship where we can actually worship the finer parts of our partner, the best parts of them. Not only who they are, but who they have the potential to be. If we can worship that part without um, disrupting or betraying our core values, I just think that's really wonderful. I mean, you and I talk about this. That's a topic for another interview, but we talk about this in the relationship sanctuary, where there's a personal sanctuary and there's a relationship sanctuary. And unless I can really the function in a relationship sanctuary is to increase my partner's quality of life. I can't do that if I'm not taking care of myself at a core level.
Well, we've grown a lot in our relationship and how we've uh, a lot, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things though is how do you worship the goddess when the goddess is just being a total bitch?
Well, one way is by not lashing back. One way is by holding space. So for me, you know me, I try and hold space, and if I can't hold space, if I'm getting too triggered, I leave. That act of leaving before I open my mouth and say something hurtful is an act of worship.
Oh,
It's an act of deep reverence because I know myself. And the last thing I would ever want to do, my mission in my life is to live my life as a work of art without regrets. That's part of my mission. And so I don't want to give into an impulse to lash out and then regret it for days, months, years.
so I'm going to get a little personal here,
Oh, yeah?
because this one was such a game changer in our relationship. When I was doing something purely unconscious, based on some of my old wounding of I, or it could have just been a complete difference in, the masculine, feminine way of going about finding out answers about something. But you were telling me about something and you said, no, I'm not going to talk to you about that. Or
Yeah.
no, you just used the word no. And I got incredibly offended by that. And I took that super personal. And we broke up over Thanksgiving. And I was really heartbroken. And by you leaving and having that stand of your own autonomy and having the right to choose what you're going to share or not share, or having the right to say yes or say no, that by saying no, I had to do all this maneuvering inside to find out what I needed to know about in order, because it was so unconscious. I didn't know what I did, you know? I didn't
Hmm.
understand what I did that had you say no, that closed the door to the relationship. And, but in some ways, it must have been benevolent because I found my way back to see you, convinced you to like let me back in a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And it was during that trip that I discovered that when somebody actually says no, that it is an act of worship sometimes.
Yeah.
That the person is not saying no because they want to limit you, but they're saying no because they want to protect you.
Well,
Or
and
they're
if
saying no because they're protecting themselves.
right, right. If I'm going against a core value of mine in my life and I collapse that, I can no longer trust myself to take care of myself. And if I can't take care of myself, I'm not worthy of being in relationship for you.
Let's talk. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the collapse because I think that both men and women tend to collapse in relationship.
Yeah. Um, what about it?
Well, how do you keep your space? How do you keep your balls?
By digging deep, by knowing, it's about knowing who I am and knowing core values. And more than anything, it's about trusting my body.
Oh,
My
yeah.
body's an antenna. So I've been doing this a long time. So right now I'm at the point in my life where if my body says no, I honor that, even if I don't know why. And yeah, it's interesting. It just takes lots and lots of practice. And a lot of, when we talk about self-confronting, like each of us has Mother Teresa and Charles Manson inside of us and everything in between. And if there's any part of those beings that we cannot embrace, we don't have to indulge in them, but we need to recognize them. Not embrace as in own, but own. Say own. Yes, this is what I feel. This is not how I'd like to feel, but this is how I feel. This is what I want, or whatever. If we can't own those parts, that part goes into shadow. So the more I can embrace who I am without arrogance or shame, the better opportunities I have to do the right thing, to be the kind of man I want to see in the mirror. You know, it's we're keeping your balls in relationship is just keeping our integrity.
Yeah. And then we've had this situation where I like to stretch beyond where I think I can actually be. I have a good ideal about who I am and about how open I am.
Right,
And oftentimes you've caught that. And when I couldn't hold my space,
right.
you as
Well, I
my
don't know if you want to
king.
talk. You want to get personal in this
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so there's a couple of times when we've had an open relationship where you and I have taken time apart, and we say, okay, we say you can go do your thing, and I'll do my thing. We have clear agreements around safety and stuff, and then we're going to come back together. Well, it's happened a number of times with you and I, and I would basically, I didn't say it at the time, but I knew I was giving you a hall pass to go play. But if I went to play, I knew you wouldn't be able to handle it. So I didn't go play. But I didn't tell you I wasn't going to go play. I just didn't go do it.
Right.
Okay. Now that's not collapsing. If going and playing was a core value of mine, I would have done it. But it's about, clear agreements and consent are very interesting because we can have a verbal consent between us, but part of being in a relationship and the relationship sanctuary is seeing the other person's shadow. And I wouldn't have given you a hall pass if it really wasn't okay with me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done that because that would have been self-betrayal. And I would have taken a hall pass if I hadn't, if not doing that would have betrayed me. But I knew that I could give you a hall pass or whatever that's called, and I wouldn't betray myself. And I wasn't going to miss anything by not taking my own hall pass.
Yeah. And there's something else about
That's
that.
another, I'm sorry. So that's another level of consent. Even though I had consent from you to go do something, I could see that it wasn't going to work. Or
Right.
I judged it wasn't going to work.
or
So
and or that I would be betraying myself because it's something that I thought you would want because I wanted it.
yeah, I don't, it wasn't like I was making your decisions for you. I was basically making them for me
Right.
because any benefit I would have gotten from taking off and doing things wouldn't have been worth it on my return, and the pain it would have caused you.
And the relationship.
And yeah, in the relationship, yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Until I got mature enough to be able to say, go ahead and do it.
Well, until you knew yourself well enough to know when to say yes and when to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I am incredibly grateful for.
Yeah. And it was a learning process. And I think part of the reason why I got to that place was because you could hear what wasn't being said and could see the bigger picture of,
Right. Yeah, we call that loving between the lines.
yes.
I
Yeah.
wish you could hear what I can't say.
Yeah. And then we played with that uh, slowly and carefully so that we could keep the relationship intact.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of also worshiping the goddess. And I would say worshiping the God, though you don't touch upon this in this book so much. You
Right.
said there's going to be a sequel to this book, so we're all looking forward to that.
Maybe.
Maybe. But I think worshiping the God is really when a woman is able to be totally honest and authentic and say yes when they mean yes and no when they mean no.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the difficult things about being a man is needing to read the air, needing to
That
guess what's going on. And when somebody tells me what's going on, when you tell me what's going on, it's like, wow, okay, cool.
So you continue to talk about like when you're ready to be a good partner, that you know, how to find a good partner, but also to look into yourself and to see, well, how can I show up as a good partner?
Mm.
And then you also talk about being in a committed relationship as a sacred container. Can you talk
Yeah.
more about that?
People, people tend to think of commitment as a prison, but it's the thing that, I mean, if one's not ready for commitment, it is a prison. But, in the book, and this was written again 11 years ago, 12 years ago. Yeah, it was written 12 years ago. So it's been a while. I would probably change some of it. But yeah, in my mind, one of the things that I like best about the masculine is about the yang is being able to hold a container, to hold a structure. And without commitment, there's nothing that happens in this world.
So what kind of suggestions would you have for men um, around how do you know when you're ready to be in a committed relationship or you're just saying it?
To please somebody.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because our sexuality is generally so fiery and so expansive, and so easily disrupted. I think it starts out as trying it on, like pretending as if,
Hmm.
like many things in life, we before we know how to do them, we pretend we know how, and we just try to do them by pretending, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think eventually, at least with me, what happened was because I was incapable of committing before I was in my mid 30s, really committing. I was incapable. So, which was 30 years ago, you know.
And what were some of the characteristics there?
Oh, just uncontrolled sexuality, uncontrolled sexual impulses, and an inability to be transparent with my partner, you know. But I think what happened in my mid 30s was I realized that I actually wanted to be able to commit, that was important to me. And it was more like, it wasn't even like I wanted to be able to commit. It was like I recognized the commitment in myself that was already there. And I just brought that out into the rest of my life. So commitment is not a prison, it's an incredible gift.
Mhm.
But obviously, men have different stages in their life, and we have to grow into that. Somebody in their 20s is not going to be able to commit sexually very easily or as easily as someone in their 50s. Not that it can't happen, it can happen. And if it can happen, that's awesome. But certainly as I've gotten older, I've seen that my ability to commit to somebody else is no less than my ability to commit to myself and my own life.
Nice.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good saying, actually, because I think we do have to commit to ourselves first, because if we are committed to ourselves, then we can show up as a really good partner because we're first committed to ourselves.
Right. And without transparency, we can't do that because if I can commit to myself, but if I can't share that with my partner to have my partner understand where I'm at, then I'm living in a deception.
Oh, I like this saying too. You love and respect yourself so much that you don't allow other people to disrespect you. You put boundaries on their wounds, not because you want to avoid them, but because you don't allow that poison to come to you.
Right. That's from the Four Agreements, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to put that in there? Oh, that's when your partner becomes a bitch goddess. That's great. I forgot about that. Yes.
Yeah. So, and people lash out when they're angry and they say hurtful and they do hurtful things. And, ideally, no matter how far down into the gutter our partner goes, we refuse to go there. Not because we're being kind, but because we have too much respect for ourselves to lower ourselves to that place. That's not the kind of human being I want to be.
Great.
Even if my partner is a living bad example, I refuse to be a living bad example. No, obviously, you and I both know we've blown that a number of times, right?
So we keep
So that,
cleaning it up.
but that's the intention, and we lean into it and we learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah, we are human after all.
Yeah.
Um, this is also a good one. I think a lot of men and women misunderstand this, but scoping out another woman and bringing it home. I'd like you to talk. You always said to me that, I'm always going to look, there's always going to be beautiful women. The sexual desire to be with women is always going to be there, but bringing it home is a different story.
Yeah, it's like using that energy in my body. It's recognizing that I don't always need to, just because I have that impulse to be with somebody else, I don't need to do that because that's an energy in me that's in me already. And I can bring that home and share that with my partner. I mean, it's
And
wonderful to be with other people. We both know that. It feels wonderful, and it's not always good. It's wonderful, but it's terrible. And many, many times it's not been worth it.
And so when somebody has a slip up, what do you think about what happens then?
Well, it
How do
depends on what one means by a slip up. I mean, we don't just wake up
oops.
one morning in bed with somebody. It's not like dropping a plate of spaghetti, you know, like oops. Like no, that's not how it works. Like so if you're talking about physical contact, then, I mean, these are all learned skills. Learning to navigate this is learned. So it depends on the agreements, and it depends on the nature of the slip up, whether it's like a serious misstep or whether it's like a catastrophic crack in the container. Um, I don't think there's any rule around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just know that with some of the people that I work with, that or people I know actually, is the attraction finds its way. They flirt, and then flirtation goes into a little more curiosity, and then a little more curiosity, and a little more
You get in a fight
curiosity,
with
and
your partner,
oops,
right? And then it's,
oops.
well, we're just gonna, I'm only gonna do it a little bit. I'm
Yes,
not gonna
just
really go all the way, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, for me, the issue is it starts with the flirting,
yeah.
and that's an internal boundary. That has nothing to do with somebody else. If I'm running energy with somebody, in my mind, I'm cheating. Now, obviously, I like that because it feels good, right? I like when people are attracted to me. I like feeling like somebody wants me. That feels good. But if I'm in a relationship that's monogamous or we have agreements not to do that, I'm really vigilant with myself not to do that, not to leak. We call it leaking.
Leaking energy. Yeah.
So, and because I know where all those paths go, that road there, I know where that road goes, and I can say, oh, well, I'm just gonna flirt a little bit. But the minute I start on that road, I know where it ends up. So if I start to do that, I'll go, where's that road go? That is not where I want to be. And if my relationship isn't working at home, then I need to end it or renegotiate it so that it does work.
Yeah, these are basically, these are small, everything makes the relationship. So if you're speaking respectfully, if you are to your partner, if you're honoring yourself and you're honoring your partner's yes or no, and if you fight fair, and if you disclose where you're happy or where you're unhappy.
Yeah, important truths. Yeah,
It really, it is all an act of worship.
absolutely, absolutely. And we talk about self-disclosure. You and I talk about this sometimes, where I feel like my job is to not to disclose everything. It's only to disclose everything that is important to the relationship. I don't need to give you a blow-by-blow description of anything other than telling you that I've been totally faithful to our agreements and totally faithful to this relationship. And so if you ask me for, if we do something we call withholds, right? Well, do you have a withhold? I have a withhold. I give that in a way that's totally clean and totally honest about everything that's important, but I'm not flooding you with details about things because that's not important. What's important is important.
And if I ask you something, though, you're very honest about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much so that I stopped asking you about details.
Right.
Because women want to know the details, but they really don't because it's so scarring. So
Right.
now I learned that if I have a question, I first ask that question, why? What's my intent behind that?
Oh,
Am,
interesting. Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
intending to forgive and stay in this relationship and find compassion, or am I asking this question because I really want to get away and I'm having a hard time saying no?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
looking for
That's a great
something.
question. Do I want to leave or do I want to stay?
Yeah.
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 So yeah, that's a tricky one. Well, I just want to say, like, I know that we could go on and on about all the different details about how communication works and how we show up for a relationship, but a big part of this worship has to do with the rivers of love, sexuality, and the heart of healing.
Hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about the sacred rivers of love?
Well, I mean, you and I are obviously both on the same page that arousal, eroticism, eros is an incredibly powerful and healing force. So the rivers of love is aroused body work between consenting adults. That it combines deep tissue body work. It's a ceremony where one person gives to another, and it combines deep tissue body work with sexual arousal and with Taoist practices, Taoist breathing and movement practices. So it's eclectic. There's pieces of Rolfing in there, and pieces of Taoism in there, and pieces of Taoist sexuality in there, and yeah. So it's a combination of body work and sexual arousal, where one person gives to another, and one of the ideas is that, obviously this is not something one can do, or I would not do in a clinical setting or with somebody who wasn't a partner, but doing it with a partner, obviously there's limitations when we're doing healing work with our partner, that there's some things that we should not do with our partner in terms of healing. But this is something that I think is really, really valuable for partners to do together. And it's not just physical healing, it's psycho-emotional healing.
Can you describe a little bit about how the giving and receiving is so that
Yeah, so typically one person will give and one person will receive, and this is ceremony that we teach, where we used to teach. We're not teaching anymore. Where one person will, it's creating sacred space, and then typically when we're teaching, the woman would receive first, and the man gives, and it's using arousal to create intimacy and wholeness, integration. And the person receiving doesn't need to do anything except receive. And the person who's giving should not do anything except give. So there's no need to reciprocate. There's no reciprocity in that. There can be afterwards where you can switch places. And when we are in highly aroused states, our tissue opens. It's true for women. It may also be true for men. I think it is, but for women, certainly, when women are aroused, when there's a lot of oxytocin flowing, there's um, there's relaxin as well as oxytocin released in the body, which is released during pregnancy, and it hits a tissue called elastin, and so the body will literally open the tissue, the joints will open in arousal. So deep tissue work in arousal, there's the pain threshold increases, so you can go deeper. You still have to be careful and consider it. You can go deeper, but the body work is much more profound. It's quicker. The body work is quicker and it's more emotionally gratifying than just regular deep tissue work. But obviously, it's meant for partners, you know. So, and oftentimes shadow will come up because shadow is in the fascia, is in the connective tissue of the body. So when we're working with those tissues in arousal, issues can come up, and that requires, attention and stuff. But
Yeah, and it could tears or words of fear or anger can arise in the body that needs to be
absolutely, yeah,
released.
yeah,
And this is also, when we have practiced this, we also have a license for creativity too. And it's a way that we can explore and play and have deeper levels of intimacy,
yeah,
ask for
exactly.
what we want.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Once the foundation is established, once there's guidelines established, and people are responsible and reliable, yeah, then you can. It's almost infinite. I've been adding material to this. I've been adding some temple bodywork material to this, and I've been adding a much more deep tissue work to this also.
Yeah. And I think that I want to ask you a little bit about that. Like this book is, like you said, it's 12 years old. Is that
12
what
years
you
old,
said?
yeah.
12
Yeah,
years
I've added a
old.
lot of material to this work. I'm constantly expanding and evolving and exploring, as and creating new practices, new contexts. But it's all based on these basic pieces of arousal, respect, body work, and breath and ceremony.
So we are used to, um, women are used to either being used as sex objects, and then you have it that we are actually feeling worshipped. What's the, how is that different? How is the attitude or the approach different?
Well, some of that's probably peculiar to me because I've always enjoyed giving more than receiving, with a lover. So that's always the part of my quirk. But also, I think because the way the ceremony is, the when the giver is just giving and knows that they are only going to be giving, that allows the receiver to relax. Because not only is reciprocation frowned upon, it's actually counterproductive to the giving. It stops the flow of giving. And yeah, so I think that just the structure of the ceremony is really helpful. In yeah,
And what does it provide for you to give to a woman?
I feel powerful, and I feel gentle. I don't know. It's kind of awe. It's the same thing as in Mankind Project MKP when somebody's doing carpet work or we teach our self-defense classes to help facilitate somebody's somatic transformation is really humbling.
Mm,
Once you get past either the violence of the self-defense classes or the sex of the rivers of love or the emotional intensity of Mankind Project, once you get past all those things, you've got a person who you care about and you are helping to facilitate their somatic transformation to become the best version of themselves they can be. That's really humbling.
mm,
And then, of course, if there's love there, if there's romantic love there, that just makes it all the better.
mm.
And some of that's shadow, some of that's mate signaling, and idealized self and virtue signaling, and that's all true. There's always some egoic thoughts in there, but beyond the egoic thoughts, there's also a piece that's genuinely cares and genuinely wants people to transform.
And how about when it comes to receiving as a man?
That was much harder for me, but I'm learning, don't you think?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, if we can only give what we can only receive, we're not whole beings. The Tao is reciprocity. Things shift and move towards each other and transform. And if we're only doing one but not the other, we're out of balance. So it's good for me. It's really good just to receive and not to have to control everything. And it also allows me to listen to my body. And if something isn't working, just say it's not working.
Mhm.
And
So
honor the
where's
fact that it's not working for me, or I'm not getting an erection, or whatever, I can't relax, or whatever it is, and then really looking inside and seeing what that is.
and what do you think the hardest things for men to receive or
Well, I think there's different kinds of men. Some men, that's the only thing they do is receive.
mhm.
It's a kind of ugly entitlement. Other men really want to give, but they don't have the skills to give. Um, I think men are different that way, but probably losing an erection is a big deal for most guys, and or not getting an erection. And men want to feel competent, and being willing to not be competent is critical. Being willing to fuck up as a lover is really critical because that's the only way we learn anything. And everybody's different.
And how would a man want to be worshipped?
By being accepted for who he is, by understanding that his sexuality can be wild and explosive, and that's not an excuse for any poor behavior, but it's an understanding of what happens in his body. By allowing men to provide and giving them and being appreciative for what they do provide, rather than trashing men and calling them dogs. By realizing that they are oftentimes wired different than women, and and recognizing that most men are good people. Not all of us by any means. There are a lot of us who are assholes, but I think most of us either are or genuinely want to be good human beings.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, this covers the book. However, and this is a great read, and it does have just, beautiful illustrations in the back, you know. Um, and it really is a phenomenal book. It's a really easy read, but it's so simple to read because it speaks so true. It's like a true source, that you kind of,
Mhm.
I don't know where you gathered this from your own experience, or if some of it was channeled. It's got great humor, but this covers your book. But since we were talking about, like, we all want to be treated well, and I think we all have that deep desire to be worshiped, meaning that we just want to be seen for who we are truly,
Right.
and be loved for our light, our dark, to be accepted and respected. And when we're not respected, there's something that you also love to study and is a strong passion of yours, which is the self defense for women. I just want to take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about, you go from rivers of love worship to teaching women how to defend themselves from men and how to be safe in the world.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the same, two sides of the same coin, and it's all I don't know why. It's just my wiring. They're both things that interest me. Sacred sexuality really interests me, and keeping people safe really interests me. And but probably it was my story is because I was bullied as a kid. I was beaten up a lot and stuff. But yeah, I think it's I don't know why. I don't know why that's part of me, but I think it's essentially the same thing. It's having a profound respect for myself and a profound respect for the sovereignty of others, and a recognition that people don't like to talk about sex and they don't like to look at violence, but they're both everywhere. And until we can look at our lives and where we live and who we are, we can look life right in the eye, we're not going to be able to function well. So it's just another part of being awake.
So, do you want to share a little bit about the fast defense? I mean, we've worked on that as well, and ideally, we would do, the fast defense and sacred rivers
I
as
think there's
well.
other videos on that.
So, this book was written 12 years ago, and I think it still reads very current. But what are some of the things that you would change in this book if you were to write it tomorrow?
Hmm. Well, I would probably soften the voice that I use. I'm a little bit crude in parts, and I think I had more anger in me at the time, and I think I have less anger now. So I probably wouldn't be quite so harsh in my delivery and not quite so cocky.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of technical material I would add in terms of the rivers of love ceremony and the ways to release different parts of the body in arousal, including very very detailed pelvic work and intraoral work inside the mouth and stuff like that. There's a lot of work on the suboccipital area that, I mean, during arousal, there's so much potential for moving the fascia and moving the connective tissue in the body. So there's that. And there's also a bunch of temple body work pieces that I would throw into that I would add in there in terms of the ceremony and the flow.
Can you
Um,
explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the original inspiration for the work was from temple body work, which was a Hawaiian. It is a Hawaiian form of body work that I received in the mid '90s, and then in 2000 I started creating this work, and then it changed so much it's not even recognizable to the original temple body work. But there's pieces of the original temple body work I would like to include in it to to extend the sensuality of the ceremony. Um, there's also, I would probably, if I had to do it over, if I do a second edition, I would probably do a section on men receiving, because as you know, that's a really different ceremony in a lot of ways. It's similar, but it's quite different because the way the yang is wired differently than the yin. It receives differently, so there's different procedures and stuff. And I would include a lot more detailed anatomy and physiology and speculation as to why this work is so powerful. So I think that's it. Yeah. And I would have, yeah. And, I've thought about doing a book on aroused body work for couples, like a technical manual. And I would love to do videos, but right now the state of animation is not up for that. And I don't want to use live models. So as soon as we can get the animation up where we can do animated videos of the work, and I can get a good technical illustrator to do the anatomy, I think it's a whole body of work in the future that could really take off for couples to do with each other to help increase their pleasure, their bonding, and their physical and emotional health and spiritual health.
Great. Is there anything else you want to add?
I love you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Um, I will just say that this body of work actually has changed my life.
Nice.
Um, I know from when we were just starting to date, and you would do a lot of this work without me even knowing what the rivers of sacred rivers of love. And it released a lot of trauma that was in the body, not so much in my state of affairs, but anywhere that I held tight in my
Mhm.
body got released so that more chi could move through it. And with that increase of chi, I was able to actually see more and experience more heightened awareness around my ancestral line, my limiting beliefs,
Mm.
released a lot of emotion, um, where I got to fall in love with myself, where I got to experience my inner goddess like as a real, tangible experience.
Mm.
And there were times when I even got to listen to the ancestors
Yeah.
and be, you know, work our magic and manifestation through the use of opening up the body through this technique.
Mm.
And teaching this technique, I will say that I think the couples that we have worked with, and has experienced this, that I always saw a deeper level of intimacy, a greater and clear communication, and a deep respect for each other after these ceremonies.
Mm. Yeah, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for your work in the world. And I'm so grateful for you as a partner, and how you've stuck by my side and really have had my back. And I trust you implicitly. And I just really love you and I honor you and thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet.